As a Newburyport native, I have seen Newburyport change quite a bit over the last 40 plus years. And, and, you know, we're here to talk about the question. Newburyport is changing drastically.
It has changed, yes.
Is it for the better? That's the conversation that we're having today. I'm Rachel Person. This is Dolores Person, my mom. We're local real estate agents from Newburyport, Mass. with William Ravis. And you have been in Newburyport since when?
1980. No,
78?
78. Actually, 78, because I was here a few years before.
You were married?
I was married at the Windsor House, which was on Federal Street. It was the Little Inn. It was called the Little Inn.
It's now a residence,
British
obviously.
couple,
Across from the White Church
Yep, across from the Presbyterian Church.
Yep.
It was a very different place then. It was very, very funky and very affordable.
So you had a friend that lived in West Newbury at the time?
I did. So when I was in college, actually, I was in school in Boston, and my family lived in Long Island, and so it was like, do I really want to drive all the way home for Thanksgiving? And I decided not to, so I went to her house in West Newbury. We're getting off the highway, and her dad actually owned a funeral home in Newburyport, so they were local people. They owned a few funeral homes, and I said, "What about Newburyport?" And she said, "Oh, you don't want to go to Newburyport. No, it's dangerous, and you don't want to go there. We don't go there ever." Okay, so there's that.
Yep.
And yeah, so when I moved here and I worked at 10 Center Street, and it was funky and small and fun. But
very rundown. This is before the downtown revitalization project had taken, or right?
It was right when it was happening. That's when. So there was a whole group of men. There were a whole group of men who Byron Matthews and Jonathan Woodman and Bashaw that all got together and said, "Stop! We're not going to redevelop. They were going to tear down downtown because a lot of the stores were empty."
Yeah.
And every year the stores would empty. Every single year the stores would empty in January after the Christmas season, and
it was a ghost town, basically.
And it still happens. A lot of them were actually boarded up.
Yeah.
So it was a very different place. Our schools were very different. We had neighborhood schools. We had the Kelly School, the Breshnahan School, the Brown School. They were all separate elementary schools.
For different neighborhoods.
Yep. And interesting, I think we talked about this when we were talking about the Brown School redo, is that we lived on Parsons Street, which dumps right to Prospect Street, which is like right at the Brown School. And we would just stand outside and watch you guys walk to school. And that was fine.
It was really nice.
It was really nice. And you could ride your bike. I would send her downtown by herself on her bicycle. And she'd go to Bergeson's and have a hot dog and a Coke and have an extra 50 cents in her pocket for a tip. And but it was a different world.
The South End in the early 80s, the word... I would say it was not desirable, would be the proper
there were
term for it.
Kids that lived in the North End were not allowed to play with kids who lived in the South End. And when I was working at Center Street, I desperately wanted to buy my first home, was not in real estate. And I went in and said to my bosses, "We found a great two-family house we're going to buy with our in-laws at the bottom of..."
By the way, Center Street is Porta Vita now.
It's always Center Street.
I know, it will always be 10
those
Center,
of us.
but just so everyone
Porta
knows.
Vita, yes. And it was a fine dining establishment at the time, quasi. Anyway, I went in and I said, "We found this great house. It's at the bottom of Lime Street. It's a two-family. It was built in the 1600s or early 1700s." And they said, "We are not letting you move to Lime Street under any circumstances. We care about you. You're going to have a child. You can't bring up a child on Lime Street."
We also used to call it Slime Street.
Yeah, Slime Street.
Because it was...
Well, there was a bar on the corner. Actually, it was called the Bucket O' Blood.
Stop it.
I'm not kidding you.
Yeah.
So I have friends that grew up in Joppy, which is Water Street.
Joppa?
Joppy.
Yeah.
And the reason they lived in Joppy, because it was the poorest. So that's the Water Street and up to the seawall on the left. So that's like 250 to 300 on the odd side of the street.
On the water.
On the water, on the seawall.
That was the poor neighborhood.
That was the poorest neighborhood. It was a mixed neighborhood. And my friend who grew up there on the seawall, his mom bought their house in the 40s. and it was a 2-family, and it was served them well. And they had tenants, and they had roommates, and they had, and that's what people did. They took in boarders.
Yeah.
And the doors would close, and that would make the new unit. It wasn't really an apartment. It was completely just ad lib, shall we say.
Yeah.
Well, that house I sold for them about, it's got to be 4 years ago now.
Yeah, about that.
And it sold for 1.85. And
Yeah.
it sold for 1.8. It needed everything. I think a couple $1 million of probably.
It was a 2-family.
It's a
Important to note.
2-family,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they've kept it as a 2-family. I think they've kept a small unit there.
Mm-hmm.
But all of the homes along there, all those families knew each other's.
Yeah.
It was the cousins and the Lucys.
Yeah.
And they all knew each other. They all played together. And to the right of the brown house, as you're going out to Plum Island on the left, there's this row of houses, and there's a section that's open. They used to call that the Beacon Ave Beach, because there was sand there, and
Yeah.
the kids would swim in the river right there.
Yeah.
The river was
Wow.
disgusting.
No.
The river was disgusting and literally smelled, and that's why it was the poor part of town, because the sewage dumped directly into the Merrimack River.
Fun.
Yeah.
And I also want to note that, like, when I was growing up, I would ride my bike downtown, and going down like Prospect Street, like people need to understand that, like, there were people who had couches in their driveways.
Yes.
That did not have jobs, that would sit there and like pound Bud Lights and chain smoke cigarettes, and you could hear them screaming at their kids.
Yep.
And like, it was a very, very
some colorful names
different
for those
community.
families,
Yes, we did. But the question is, when did you see the shift happen in Newburyport?
Well, there's been a few. I think that the condo market started exploding in the 80s and 90s, and all the multifamilies, they started realizing that these big houses that had all these units, that they could be condos.
Well, and also a lot changed when the downtown redevelopment was done.
Oh, well, that was huge. That was late 70s. But I think to me, one of the big movers was the railroad coming in. When the commuter rail came
in the late 90s, or mid 90s.
I'm not sure the year, but when the railroad came in, but a couple of the things that have disappeared that were really cool, particularly in the South End, were corner stores. There were corner stores everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look at some of these buildings and you'll drive up and say, how come the corner of that is
flat,
is angled
and flat? Yeah,
it's because that was the door to the store, and you go in there, and there was one on Orange Street, there was one on Lime Street.
What was the one on Lime Street called that we used to go to?
Oh, Stickney's. There were two on Lime Street, but one called Stickney's.
It was directly across from the Brown School.
Yes,
and after school, I would go and get a whatchamacallit bar. I'm dating myself, and a Jolt Cola, which I was like definitely not allowed to have.
And Garbage Pail Kids
cards, and like it was great because all of us kids could just walk across the street and go to the store.
So here's the thing about that.
Yeah,
you got to realize you're not supposed to have alcohol or cigarettes sold within certain distance from a school.
Could you?
We used to step over drunks to get you into that store, and they'd be sitting on the corner, sitting on the steps, and they would not move.
No.
And they'd leave a little space so we could get in and out, and they'd be sitting on the steps, smoking cigarettes and drinking Budweisers, and they sold lottery tickets.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, it's going to be so dense if they put all those apartments in the Brown School. Well, there used to be a line for cars picking up kids. So
right. How is it any much different?
Yeah.
But so the train came in, I believe, when I was a junior in high school, because I started taking it into the city when I was a senior. So it was like 99. So it was late 90s the train came. And we also had the .com boom. So in the 90s, like Newburyport was still like a pretty working class, mixed income community.
Yep.
Because there were still like, look at the Ridge. Like there's always been wealthy families in Newburyport. It's not like it was all working class.
Yeah, but I want to talk about that just a little bit, because those wealthy families that lived on the Ridge back in the day were doctors and lawyers.
Yeah.
That's what it was. It was doctors and lawyers. And now it's all kinds of young couples, .com people, technology,
of course,
fintech people.
But I just want to say it was always mixed income in Newburyport.
Oh yeah.
As I was growing up, it wasn't just like it was a poor town. No. Because of the giant, beautiful, historic houses on High Street, like it was.
Well, the doctors have to live somewhere.
Right.
So, the doctors have to live somewhere, and the lawyers and the judges, and they all lived on High Street. And
Yeah, and there was the shipbuilders and
but it was
merchants'
also extended
houses.
families. So
Yeah.
a lot of those families, they had apartments, or they had third floor apartments, or they had carriage house apartments. And when the kids would get married, they'd live in those apartments for 2 or 3 years until they could afford to buy their first house.
And I looked at someone's sales card for something on High Street, and I'm sure they did a lot of work to it, but I was looking back, and like in 1989, it was like a 5,000 square foot Federal sold for $89,000.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, they did need a lot of work, so a lot of them did. So it's not like, it was in tip top shape.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was always very mixed income, and I think that when the train came, that brought corporate people out to Newburyport because they could easily commute then into Boston.
Well, the perception changed too. It became a perception that we were not out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Right. And then all of a sudden I started hearing, like on Chronicle and local TV and even on national things about Newburyport. Nobody even knew where it was when I moved up here. But now if you could be in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands and say to somebody who live in Newburyport, and they know where it is.
Right.
So it's a very dramatic difference.
Right. And, then the housing crisis happened in 2008, and you were a real estate agent in Newburyport at that time. Did it have a huge impact on Newburyport?
It did. Well, what was interesting, and what I think what tends to happen when there's a housing crisis or an economic crisis, is that the towns that do well stay doing well.
Yeah.
So Newburyport was very bifurcated. There are areas that stayed fine. I think there was more loss of value in Amesbury, Salisbury, Haverhill than there was in Newburyport because it was starting to be up and coming. But there's always, and it's always the condos lead the charge down when the prices go down. So that happened. I was here when 9/11 happened, and our phone stopped ringing. But it has always been such a beautiful place, and I think that had beautiful and historic, that has been the draw.
And also important to note that because there was so much, I guess, poverty in Newburyport for so long after the clipper ship business left, there were many beautiful historic houses that were left preserved because no one could afford to rip them down.
So we'll go back. Let me go back to that. So there were a couple things that converged at the same time.
Yeah.
1812. 1812, the Tax Act of 1812, the War of 1812, the Great Fire of downtown Newburyport that burned down.
1811?
1812.
Oh, wow. This is a big year.
Big year. Burned down most of downtown, and that's why why it's brick. And it's also, if you look at the roof lines of the stores downtown, you'll see little metal wrought iron dividers. They have firewalls between them because of the fire. It burned down 1.5 acres of downtown Newburyport.
Wow!
Started on Inn Street in a stable. That there was actually a stable on Inn Street, and so that put us in the deep freeze really right through the 70s.
Yeah,
it was at the same socioeconomic level as Lawrence at that time,
and so that's why a lot of these.
That's why the buildings were not
demolished, because people couldn't afford to demolish them, but they also couldn't afford to fix them up,
and they wouldn't be worth anything after they fixed them up.
Right, because there was no
if you go to a place
market
like
for them.
Newton, or even you go to the South Shore and you'll see a 1600s house, and it's like by itself,
yes,
and there's nothing else around it. It's except a gas station and like a traffic light. And that's because everything that was around it, I think I was in Milton, and I saw this, and they made this big deal about it being a late 1600s house, and I thought, yeah, we got a lot of those.
Right. So when people started realizing that Newburyport was a place to be,
well, the first wave of people were people like us. We were, creative people that came out of advertising, art schools, that kind of thing, who really liked historic buildings, and a lot of us did silly things like hand stripped the woodwork in our house so that it had no paint on it, which is so stupid because they had paint on them when they were built. But a lot of people did a lot of renovations themselves back in the 80s, 90s.
Because they couldn't afford.
Who knows? Of course not. And it wouldn't be worth it if they did it. So
then when people started coming to Newburyport, it was the perfect opportunity for, developers and builders because they had all of these run down massive houses that were kind of ripe for the picking. And
They were already multifamilies too, so they were condo conversion
easy
by right.
condo conversions.
That's right.
And, so there was a boom.
So the rule of thumb, just because people always say, oh, that big house, they're going to break it up into condos. You can't. If it's a 4-family, you can have 4 units. And sometimes if you go to the city, they'll say, actually, no, you can only have 3 because of parking or whatever.
Yeah.
But if you have a big 6,000 square foot single family, you're not going to be putting condos in it. People are always, I had somebody call me, what are they going to do? They're going to put condos next to me? Well, if it isn't a multi now, it won't be a multi in the future.
Very, very rare
Very
that
rarely.
they'll go backwards. So I guess the question, so that's kind of like the...
What do you all think, too? That's the question.
Yeah, that's kind of the history. And then once COVID happened, is when I saw the most dramatic shift in Newburyport, because it was still like, it was getting expensive, but it was still kind of like diverse economically. It's never been really diverse, in other ways. It's, pretty homogenous in Newburyport, unfortunately. But people started coming from urban centers and really thinking about it as a destination place to move and with work from home. And the demographic of new resident of Newburyport definitely changed.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of people from New York, California, and it's not a bad thing.
And with that comes demands for higher quality of services, and which we've seen.
Yeah, and I guess the question is this good? Like, is granted.
I don't think it's reversible.
Well, it's definitely
So
not.
it's your opinion. It's not going to, it's not going to change anything. But it is. It's a very good question. Is it good? Do we like it? Do we like it the way it was before?
Is there a certain period of Newburyport that you think of in your head as like the heyday, and like you wish you could kind of go back to that era?
Well, I think, like you said, around 2000 was really a nice era.
That was the
because
best.
Things were restored, but we still had the character. The waterfront didn't look like it does now.
No.
In fact, when my parents came to visit me way back when, they stopped a cop on the street and said, "Where's the waterfront? We want to go look at." He said, "Nobody goes there. It's dangerous. I don't want to go down there." That's where the feral cats are.
Well, that's where they pushed us teenagers, that they didn't want us to be the tourists to see us. They would push
On In
us.
Street?
Yeah, on In Street, all the little punk rockers on In Street. We would hang out.
troublemakers.
The fountains. They would push us down to the waterfront so that people who were visiting Newburyport didn't have to look at us.
Well, you were horrible.
I mean, we were a motley crew for sure. And then the other question is, if you weren't a resident of Newburyport today, would you move back?
I don't think I could afford to.
Please,
Well, I mean,
stop.
Well, I'm just saying, like, where I live now, I've thought, well, I kind of miss being in the South End. It wouldn't make any sense, and so I'm kind of like that Andover person. I don't live downtown, and I've got a garage, and I've got a big yard,
Yeah, and a pool.
and all that kind of stuff. And there's very few places where I could do that in Newburyport.
So you wouldn't buy a $3 million condo in downtown?
If I was moving from Newton, and
No, you're you.
no, I might.
Okay.
I might, but I do like the little
Right.
green space and elbow room. But I'll tell you what, it's a lot cheaper to live in a condo than it is in a single family home. So
And I'll say I live in West Newbury now. Mm-hmm. And
they didn't kick you out yet?
No, not yet.
Pretty soon, I think. They're going to come for you.
But I would not move back to Newburyport if I had the money. I mean, the first problem is I don't have the money.
Well, that's the biggie.
That's the biggest thing. Like, I can't afford it. But also, like, the kind of property that would be right for my husband and I, we need space. We need a garage. Like, it's just not something that you can get in Newburyport unless you have $2 million. And even then, like, you're lucky if you get, you know what I mean? So
Well,
it's
your
just,
neighbors would never put up with
oh,
it.
and that's the other thing, right? Like, people in Newburyport would probably have a heart attack if my husband started his Mustang early in the morning.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't fly. Like,
You're very lucky where you are.
yeah, we're left alone basically, and I never would have thought, as someone who lived in West Newbury when I was a little bit younger, that I would ever want to live there. And now I'm like, I don't want to leave.
Yeah, it's a nice town.
And if I ever was to leave my house, I would want to build something else in West Newbury. Like, I just don't want. I
think it's a great option for people, especially with kids that come into the area. And it's a very family-oriented bedroom community.
Yeah,
so.
it has a nice feel to it. But we're curious what your thoughts are on the landscape change of Newburyport. Do you think it's for the better? I know a lot of old multi-generational Newburyport people are going to say, no, I hate it. So I'm just just curious. And when did you move here? Did you move here recently? Right. How have you seen it change? Just curious to know. And we'll see you on the next one.